Welcome to the Double Stop Workshop, and I'll just get right into it. Um, so, double stops, it's two notes played at the same time, and my original background playing the mandolin was playing single note lines, fiddle tunes, that kind of thing. And then I joined this band called the Good Old Persons, and it was primarily a vocal band. And I found that double stops were the most useful way of approaching these singing type songs. And I figured out some from recordings and just applied them to other songs. And hopefully I'll show you a way that you can take some basic double stops and apply them to a variety of songs and keys. But what we're going to do, we'll start. I think you got handouts, correct? So we're going to start with the sheet that just says G double stops, and it shows 6 fingerboard diagrams. Hopefully you have that there. But I can talk through it if you don't want to look at the paper. I can just make sure you're all muted, okay? Thank you. Um, so the first one, okay, before I show you the first one, this is all going to be for a G chord, 2 notes of a G chord specifically. So the first one is going to be the 5th fret on the D string and the 2nd fret on the A string. So just go ahead and grab that. And you might notice if you play the bluegrass chop chord, it's the middle 2 notes of that chop chord. So G and a D, and I'm using my 1st and 3rd fingers. Then I am going to slide up the neck with those same 2 fingers up to the 9th fret and the 5th fret. So 9th fret on the D, 5th fret on the A string. And then back again to the first one. So if this is new to you, it's good to shift back and forth to get that under your fingers. And you'll notice the first one, the G and the B, are a 4 fret spread. So it spans 4 frets. When you slide up to frets 9 and 5, you're spanning 5 frets. And then the third basic one we're going to move over to the A and E strings. Just one second. So we're on the A and E on the 5th fret on the A and the 3rd fret on the E string. And I'm fingering that with my middle finger and my ring finger, because that's the fingering you would use in first position. But sometimes we may be fingering it with our 1st and 2nd fingers. But for right now, let's just stick with this. So to get started, we want to just play through from one to the next. So I'll tell you, it's funny calling these the 4 fret spread or the 5 fret or the 3 fret. Sharon Gilchrist refers to the first one as medium, the second one is long, and the third one is short, which makes sense. Yeah, that's great. So if you just play, slide up, then to the short one, back to long, medium, so that's 3 basic shapes for the key of G. And if someone's playing a G chord on the guitar, you can play any of those 3 and it's going to sound right in with them. Now, you can go up the neck from the short one by sliding up to 10 and 7. And that's, again, with my 1st and 3rd fingers. And what that is an octave above the place we started. So we had a G and a B here. Now we have a G and a B here, an octave higher. And you can keep going to frets 14 and 10. And that's an octave higher than this one. And if you're very brave and adventurous, you could go all the way up to, I don't even know what numbers those are. It looks like it's 15 and maybe 17. But I don't recommend that. But it's there. So you slide around, get used to all those. And then from the first one we played, we can also descend down to the G and D string and play frets 7 and 5. And again, depending on what fingers you use, those would be the bottom two notes of the G chop chord. So that's a D note and a G note. And if you want to stay in this pattern of voicings, you could go down one more and play the 4th fret on the G and an open D. So that's the only double stop we've played that hasn't been a fretted note. So we have that open D just to stay in the pattern. And if you want to do this as an exercise just to make it sound resolved, you could play the final one as just an open G and a D. Okay, so that's all for a G chord. You just want to practice that, get your fingers to move around pretty effortlessly and spread out longer when you go to the long double stop, and then close up for the medium. And so that's good for a G chord, but most songs have more than one chord. So typically in bluegrass and folk music, so many songs are based on a 1-4-5 progression. So in G, the 1 chord is G and the 4 chord is going to be C. And so the mandolin is a great instrument, as you know. Everything is transposable and movable. So everything we played on the D and A string, we're going to move down to the G and D. And that's not specifically on the sheet. I just showed you the basic 3 and decided to leave it up to you to do a little bit of work and figure out where to move those. But I'll tell you right now. So you move down to 5 and 2, and then up the neck to 9 and 5, also on the G and D string, and then to the middle 2 strings we have 5 and 3, and then up to 10 and 7. When we were at this point before, when we were in G, we moved up the neck, but now we can move over 2 strings to 7 and 3. So that's 7 on the A and 3 on the G. And for the final one, we'll go up to 10 and 8. All right. So that's 2 octaves of C double stops. Then the 5 chord in the key G is going to be a D chord. So everything we played for the C, we're going to move up 2 frets. And that's the starting point for your D double stop. So that's 7 and 4. And then up to 11 and 7. You could also play that as a 4th fret on the D and an open A. It's the same pitches. And then 7 and 5 on the D and A. And then we can move over to 2 higher strings to 5 and 2. Then up to 9 and 5. And then finally 12 and 10. So now you have 2 octaves of double stops to work with for the key of G with just a 3 chord progression. So as you play the progression, say it's you're on a G, G chord and you're playing this G double stop, and the progression changes to a C chord, you don't have to play the same fingering for the C. You could play, say, that C, because it's really easily accessible and makes a lot of sense. Because so what you're doing is playing the G 5 and 2 to the C double stop 5 and 3. Or say if you're on this G double stop, and the progression changes to a D chord, you can play this one, which is an easy shift. So a lot of times the two different double stops will have common pitches to them. So in this case, it's G, both a G note is both in the G and the C double stop. Because I don't want to get too much into the theory of it, but that's the way it works. And then if you're on this G, say, with these two fingers, you can go to a C chord, play that C. So is that making sense? Does anyone have a question at this point? If you do, just unmute. And if not, I'll just keep talking. So the next handout should say a double stop exercise in G. You have that one there. It looks like this. Something like that. And what this is the top line is just a common folky or bluegrass chord progression, not to a specific song, but just a bar of G, bar of C, back to G, to a D, C, G, then a quick D, back to G. So that would be, say, the chord progression of some non-specific song, but a way to get used to these double stops is to practice playing two shapes for each chord change. And I just kind of made up a pattern which sort of makes sense. So I'll just play it through once. So the first measure is 5 and 2 up to 9 and 5. 5 and 3 up to 10 and 7, down to 9 and 5, 5 and 2, 4 and open, and then G and D, it's 7 and 4. Then the second half of the tune is going to go up to 5 and 3, up to 10 and 7, 10 and 8, 7 and 3, 5 and 3, 5 and 2, 5 and 3. So hopefully that all is clear, and it doesn't have to be the sequence as you do it. You could just experiment and see what makes sense to you, but let's try that right now. I'll play it nice and slow, and we'll do the same thing I just did. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Second half. And there it is. So that's just an exercise to get your fingers used to making those shifts and moving from chord to chord. But I want to show you how you can apply these double stops to a song. And since these are double stops that are just using chord tones. You won't be able to replicate every little detail of the melody because usually there's scale tones in the melodies. There's few tunes that just stick with chord tones, but scale tones, those are just notes of the scale. Chord tones are notes of the chord. So this tune, common bluegrass tune, Long Journey Home, or Lost All My Money But a $2 Bill. It's a good one to use. So I'll show you how you can play a solo for that, or a kickoff, or whatever you want to call it, uh, using these double stops. So I'll play it first of all, so hopefully it'll sound like the tune. And that's it. So where we're starting is on the short double stop down on the 7th and 5th fret of the G and D string. And that would be the pitches that would replicate the line lost all, lost all. And then we're going to go to 5 and 2 on the middle two strings. Then up to 9 and 5. Back down to 5 and 2. Back up to 9 and 5. 5 and 2. And then the chord progression goes to a C chord, the 4 chords. So we're going to play this C double stop, which is 9 and 5 on the G and D. So we have 9 and 5 on the G and D strings. And then the progression goes back to a G chord. So it's easy to get the G by dropping from 9 down to 5. So that's 7 and 5 now. So from 9 and 5 to 7 and 5. So that's the first half of the song. Second half starts in the same place. 7 and 5 on the G and D. 5 and 2. 9 and 5. 5 and 2. 9 and 5. 7 and 5. 9 and 5. 7 and 5. 5 and 2. So let's try that nice and slow. You don't quite get it yet. You'll have the recording and you can reference back to it later if anything's giving you trouble. So let's just start 1, 2, 3. I'm trying to think what I should call these. I'll call these the short, medium, and long, just so you know what's happening, if that makes sense. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Short, medium, long, medium, long, medium, and then a long C, short. Medium, long, medium, long, short, long, short, medium. That may be a handful for you at this point, but does anyone have a question about that? If it's not working, but you understand it, that's fine. But I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone. Nope. Okay, great. So just practice that and get it under your fingers. And I'll show you a few things that can make it a little more musical or interesting. And one thing right off the bat is to slide into those double stops. And it's not so much that you hear the first 2 pitches of the slide like that, but it's just the effect of landing on the main double stop. and that's kind of a Bill Monroe effect. Mike Compton is really brilliant at doing that sliding in and outs. Sometimes you'll slide out of a note like a slur, but sliding into those double stops as you play the tune. See, that sounds cool as opposed to just going. Just try that. Just for the C chord, say. And as you're playing down, up, down, up, down, up, it's just the first downstroke is the first note of the slide. And by the second or the first upstroke, you should be on the double stop. It's kind of like, well, it's not really like Zorba the Greek, but you get the idea of that sound. I'll show you another thing that makes it a little more interesting, and that is when you go from this G, the long G, down to the short, instead of going straight to the short one, you can play a single note on the A string. So we're playing a down on the open A, upstroke on the B flat, which is the first fret, and then a down on the B note, and then you play the double stop. And that's a little Bill Monroe bluesy motif because you're playing the flatted third into the natural third, which he does in different ways, a lot, different phrasings, but I'll show you how it works up to speed. So you're going from strictly double stops to a little quick single note phrase. And there's others as well, but that's just one that always comes to mind when I play this tune. And so on. So that's one application. I mean, there's countless tunes. There's a handout in there called Lost and I'll Never Find the Way. You see that there? That song is a Stanley Brothers song. And the great thing about that melody is it is mostly made up of chord tones. So these double stops really will imply the melody. The arrangement for Long Journey Home, it's not every little detail of the melody, which would be. So there's more scale tones in it, but when you follow the contour of the melody, rising and falling, and hit the main melody notes with these double stops, it really should let folks know that, oh yes, of course, they're playing Long Journey Home. Shouldn't be a mystery. But for Lost and I'll Never Find the Way, you can pretty much play the whole melody just using these double stops. It sounds like this. That's I think it's the same progression we did in the exercise. So you could practice this as a way of playing through those double stops as well. So these there's ways to go from one double stop to the other using scale tones, and you can get more of a melody this way. For instance, say if you're on this G double stop, 7 and 5, and you're going up to the long one, 5 or 9 and 5. So what I'm doing is playing the double stop, but then focusing on the lower pitch of that double stop, which is a D note on the G string, and then playing an E note. So that's 7, 9, 5 on the D, and then playing the long double stop. So you're going from a double stop to single note. And the only note that's not a scale tone is that note, that E note. You could play it as a single note as well. But it sounds full and strong when you use these double stops, at least to start. That gets a little ahead of where we're at right now, but it's like a kickoff to I was playing the song The Lost Highway. So that's one example, going from the short one down low to the medium or the long one here in the middle. Another one that works really great So that's starting on the medium, very first one we played, playing the double stop, and then playing the B note from that double stop as a single note to a C, and then to the short 5 and 3 on the A and E string. So you could actually put those together for an exercise, and it's actually, you can apply that same song, The Lost Highway. And then something else, but that's just to get you started, so you see how you can connect the double stops in that will imply more of a potential melody. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, now I'll show you a song where you can get more of the melody, and it's again in G. It's All the Good Times Are Past and Gone. I'll just play it once, so hopefully you can see my hands okay, I guess. So that's incorporating some single notes to get more of the melody. So you can start by, in this position, where your first finger is on the 5th fret of the D string, and then the middle finger's on the 7th fret. So 7, 9, 5 on the D, and then you land right on that double stop. To that G double stop, and then this C double stop, but we're going to play it as single notes, and then down to a G. So we've broken the notes of that double stop. You could just play it all as double stop, but it's nice to hear the melody articulated cleanly. I just went to a single note G and then down a half step to the 4th fret, back up again to the 5 chord, 7 and 5 on the D and A string. And that final thing was just an arpeggio. 5 on the D, 2 on the A, 5 on the A, and then 3. More that fingering. This is a great little lick when you're playing a waltz. So that's a G note to do a D, C, slide into B, G. And that fingering, Bill Monroe used a lot in different time signatures, not just in waltzes, but a great example is the recording of Sitting Alone in the Moonlight. Bill Monroe played mandolin and sang tenor, and Jimmy Martin played guitar. And at the end of the phrase, Jimmy Martin would play a G run on the guitar, and Bill would play with the G run in it, and they meet up in the middle, and it sounds great. So check out that recording if you want to hear what I'm talking about. So that's been all in the key of G. So before we get any farther, I just want to make sure, see if there's any questions. Anyone have a question about anything? Okay. So that was a series of double stops just using chord tones, but you can use these same shapes to play a full harmonized scale. So it would be G scale with the 3rd above it. So you play them together, it sounds like this. And there's a handout for that too. It says G harmonized scale, and it's another series of fingerboard diagrams. Y'all see that? And it starts the same way on that same G shape, but then we're moving up through the harmonized scale to this 7 and 3 now, and that works over an A minor chord. But if you look down at the bottom of the diagram, you also see it works for an F chord. Down at the bottom of the page, it says A minor at the very top where the nut would be, and then down at the bottom, I just put it down there. So you know these double stops can be used for more than one chord because they have the same common tones. So A minor has an A, and the flatted 3rd is C. That's also the 3rd and the 5th of F. Not to get too much into the theory, but just I wanted to go ahead and give you that information on the sheet. So we go from G, using the same fingers, up to 7 and 3. The next one, which we were calling G before, I'm calling B minor just because it stays, it references this harmonized scale better that way. But you know it also works as a G. And then up to 10 and 7. And then we do the same fingering on the higher 2 strings. 5 and 2 is a D. 7 and 3. 9 and 5 is a F sharp minor. And then 10 and 7. So that's a way to get for sure more melody in a given tune. Um, I don't stick to this all the time in straight bluegrass where you're playing that a melody using this harmonized scale, but there are some examples of tunes where you can use this. Um, Jesse McReynolds, great Jesse McReynolds, he has an instrumental called Border Ride that's all made up of these because it has kind of a Latin American sound when you play it, like and then that's not the whole tune, but that's an example of that. So if you practice it just linearly, it's just straight up the scale. You can also practice it as a broken scale. I'm out of practice with that particular approach, but you get the idea. And if you do it that way, your fingers really get used to making the shifts at the appropriate time. So sometimes I'll use that to improvise to affect kind of a lap steel sound in a Western swing band. So let's see. It's kind of sloppy, but you get the idea of how that works too. So there's different ways you can use it. A lot of those type Latin sounding pop tunes, or that kind of thing. So that's the G harmonized scale, and then there's a sheet in there that has it in 5 different keys, including G too, that I stole from Jack Tuttle a long time ago. So don't tell him. It's got the tab and the music. So there's another type of harmonized scale where for this one I was thinking of the melody being on the bottom, the lower pitch, and this melody above being the harmony. But for this one, we're going to think of it as the melody being on top and the harmony a sixth below. And we're going to do it in the key of C since it lays out nicely. And so the first double stop is just the basic 2-fingered C chord. So that's on the D and A string, that's 2 and 3 with your first and second finger. And then you slide up to 3 and 5. And I use my first and ring finger for that. You could play it like that, but I always find this makes more sense. Then slide that up 2 frets to 5 and 7, 7 and 8. And then we're going to shift over to the A and E string, 2 and 3, 3 and 5, 5 and 7, 7 and 8. So that's another example of, I kind of think of these voicings to be useful on the very diatonic sounding songs where the other voicing of the harmonized scale could be maybe a little more bluesy depending on how you approach them. But like say, that's an example, or Oh Susanna, something like that. but I included an arrangement of the banks of the Ohio in C. So I'll just play through that so you can hear it. Sounds like this. So there's a thing you can do rather than play both pitches at the same time. You can break them up to maybe a little of that goes a long ways, but it's an option. You hear Josh Graves and early dobro players using that technique where they'll play that broken up like that. So that's like all these double stops. If we go back to the basic ones in G, just remember you can transpose them easily, but it's probably a good idea just to start out in G, get totally comfortable in G, and then maybe move to C since you already know the C ones, but then you would have to learn the double stops for F and so on. So or you could move everything in G up to the key of A just to get, but it's the same shapes and the same relationships from chord to chord. And it works for all these types of double stops, the harmonized scale or the sixth harmonized scale. And they're mostly what I've shown you has been all closed fretted notes. So it should be easy to transpose. You won't get stumped too much. But just, choose some songs that you may play already or sing already, and you can use some of these to work out an arrangement. Let's see, there's a sheet in here that has a lot of information. It's just called double stops, but everything's in the key of F. Just to, F might not be your favorite go-to key, but it's great. A lot of folks sing in the key of F, so it's a handy thing to have. And that first line there, that's just the same thing we played in G, but in F now. So it's 5 and 3, 10 and 7, 7 and 3. And then let's just skip the F major scale and go to the F major pentatonic scale. And that sounds like this. But I'm starting on a C note because we're basically in the second position, and our first finger is going to be staying as a position over the third fret. So you can go, here's the F note, but you can go down below it to the C. So if you start on C with your middle finger on the 5th fret, then ring finger on 7, then your first finger is on F. But just the straight F pentatonic scale is, it's the same as a major scale, but you leave out the 4th and the 7th. And if you phrase it this way, it's very memorable. So that's the F pentatonic scale. and then back up to the F major scale, you can play all the pitches of the F major scale, but you have to shift down to get that note, and then back right up to the 3rd fret. So the reason I included that is because I just want you to notice that whenever you're on this F double stop, the long shape works in G too, but you have all those other scale tones easily accessible in this position. You just have to keep your first finger over the 3rd fret. You could do the same thing for G if we move it up. So I think of the double stops as the real solid bones of a progression, and the scale tones are ones you can add to apply more of the melody. And then the 4th example down there, that's just the harmonized scale in F. And then the last two, those are just sort of turnarounds in the key of F, going from a 1 chord to a 5 chord. And then at this point, you're going down to first position. That last 2 measures of that. You know, the recording, Skaggs and Rice, Tony Rice and Ricky Skaggs made this recording in the early 80s of them just on guitar and mandolin, and their 2 voices doing traditional gospel and old time bluegrass and country songs. And a lot of those tunes are in the key of F, and that's sort of, you hear the mandolin player playing out of that position. Midnight on the Stormy Deep, I believe he is playing out of that position. And then the last one, this is just a little lick I like. So you can start on a double stop, short double stop on the A and E. So that only starts with a double stop and ends with a double stop. The rest is single notes. So I'm not sure why I included it in this workshop, but it's all, you combine single notes and double stops and it sounds very complete. And so for the end, I'll show you an arrangement of Toy Heart, Bill Monroe, standard vocal tune in the key of C. I think he recorded it in the key of C, and this is more or less a faithful, not exactly faithful, but pretty close to a faithful transcription of his recording. And I'll just play it for you, and then we'll break it down a little bit. Doesn't have to be that fast right off the bat, but I was just trying so So it starts on this C double stop, 5 and 2, or you're fingering it as a double stop, but you play single notes, 2, and then land on this C double stop. So that's an example of connecting this shape to this shape by playing the scale tones. And then it goes to a G chord. We're going to play a single note phrase, open 4, open 5, which is a G arpeggio, to a 3, open 1, 2, 5, and then as soon as you hit that 5 on the G, you can play the C double stop. And then we're walking down from the C to a B, to a B flat, which now you're playing a C 7th double stop, which tells you there's a F chord coming up. And to get that, we're going to slide our first finger up to that F note, and that's the position we had just been talking about on the F sheet. And then we're sliding with your ring finger from 5 to 7, and then catching the 3rd fret on the A string. To that C double stop, to that C double, repeats that. And that's the same as the first. So first line and the last line are the same. The second and third lines are the same. But I just want to point out for that F.
Just a heads up.
Sorry, what was that? Someone asked a question?
Just a heads up. We've got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
We have about 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. So we're playing that F double stop kind of in a syncopated way, or the single notes is in a syncopated way. You could just play it as a straight double stop to a C. It's simpler that way, but just as effective, I think. So you could also do that. You could just play a G double stop. So simplified, the tune would sound. C, C, which sounds really cool, I think, just like that. But I'll just play it one time so you hear it as written. And if you don't sing it in C, you can move it easily up to G. Same fingerings, or slide up the neck and play it out of D. Or even A. So if you learn this tune, just take the time to move it around a little bit, and you can apply these double stops and these scale patterns to a lot of different songs. So pretty much out of time, but are there any last questions anyone has? We never had a first question, so maybe we'll have one now. Anybody? Well, nice to see you all. Look forward to seeing you all in person some old day.
Thank you, John. We should all thank John.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. And have a great rest of your day and have fun with the double stops. Okay, so long.